Hello and welcome to the Reiki Women podcast. My name is Carrie Varela, and it's always so wonderful to be joined in this podcast with Michaela Daystar of Heartscapes Reiki and Bronwen Logan of Reiki with Bronwen. And Earth Day is around the corner, just happening this weekend. And so we thought we'd like to put our heads together and talk about the interconnection between Reiki and nature and maybe talk a little bit as well about that sense I think that a lot of healers feel in the world of Reiki and in other modalities as well, but just this sense that we want to do our best for the planet and want to help to help heal the planet. And yet there's a little bit of environmental overwhelm. There's a little bit of despondence and complacency of like how it is that we even go about doing that. So maybe we can chat a little bit about all things Reiki and nature today. So who has some thoughts on the topic?
I'll jump in. I love that we're talking about this. I love that it's Earth Day next weekend. For me, working with nature directly and working inside of the cycles of nature as part of how things get structured in my life is very much part and parcel of my Reiki practice, and it has been for a long time. There's personal reasons for that, and then there's structural and historical reasons related to the system of Reiki itself and its Shinto origins. But for me, really part of how I understand the system of Reiki, how I make sense of it in my life, is that it is a way of relating to and understanding the cycles of nature. And it is a way of kind of understanding my own symmetry with the cycles of nature and the structures in the natural world and the ways in which I am part and parcel of that, inextricable from that, and a reflection of that all at the same time. And so it's a delight to get to jump into this topic any time of the year, but springtime is a particularly lovely time to be jumping in, and fall on your side of the world, Bronwen. Those are both my favorite seasons, and so it feels really alive to be having this conversation at this time.
I had a little quote that goes exactly with what you were just talking about, because if we look at the system of Reiki, that the founder of the system of Reiki was a Shigendo, well, most likely a Shigendo practitioner, and they used to go off into the mountains and do a lot of practices. And also, actually, the posthumous name of Mikao Usui is, let me get it right, Reizan In, which means sacred mountain. Well, that's part of his name. He had a number of things. And the idea of a posthumous name is to reflect your life and what you've done in your life. So him being called Sacred Mountain is because he spent time in the mountains. He found a lot of inspiration in the mountains. So being in nature. And we can see that with the practices in so many ways. So that'll be lovely to talk about today. But just about the Shigendo practice, there's a little quote here, and it says, Shigendo teaches that a human being is a product of the universe and is him or herself a small universe. And that's exactly what you were just saying, that thing that we are this reflection of, but we also are that at the same time. And we see that with the beautiful cosmology of that we work with, the Buddhist cosmology from Japan, that we are a reflection of the heavens and the earth, and the beginning of the universe, the heavens and the earth coming together and creating us and life within it, and that we are a reflection of that. So we work with in our practices, we work with the heavens and we work with the earth, and we blend those within ourselves for that life force, that spark of life to be strong and bright. So nature is us. We talk about being our true nature, finding our true nature through the practices of the system of Reiki. And That's what it is. True nature. We are a part of it all, and it is a part of us. And we tend to forget that, and we think of ourselves when we think of nature. Actually, Carrie, when you say the word nature, do people actually think of themselves within that? Or do they think of it as all of this, But it is us. And that's what the practices within the system of Reiki are constantly telling us. With the foundation practice of Joshin Kokyoho, being that, we breathe in down into our hara, into that earth of ourselves. And then as we breathe out, we just expand ourselves out into everything. So it is just that complete osmosis into the world, backwards and forwards. And we are just a breathing part of the flowing universe. And that's a great thing to experience rather than just talk about. And that's why the practices are really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so important to, tether nature into energy work and energy-based work, because without that, I think it's really easy to lose sight of any goal, for me, nature is the ultimate healer. It's also the ultimate harmonizer. And it gives me, yes, both that connection to all that is. It helps me kind of isolate what's important to me. So if I just need to get some perspective, if I go on a long walk, that's usually like the thing that helps me get the most perspective. And but that inner and outer harmony is so important. And I think especially within the realm of energy work, there's so much disembodied wisdom that's out there about, seeking out guidance from something outside of yourself, or otherworldly guidance, or not on this planet. And I tend to shy away from all of that, because it just doesn't feel like, it doesn't provide that inner and outer harmony. And whenever I'm caught up in a worried thought, I can just go out into my garden or look out into nature and see the birds flying, and my harmony is restored. Like my inner sense that all is well and all will be well is restored. And I think we need that, because humans, I think we are very disconnected from nature in the way we're living right now. And some of my practices that I've done over the years include just like, taking off my shoes and socks and like putting my feet flat on the earth, and trying to do that every day, because for the most part, we've got like layers of concrete and flooring that we can be walking on all day long for weeks without that sacred grounding. And it's easy to lose our mind in that. Like it's easy to lose our perspective. It's easy to get anxious and to feel a sense of disconnection, that we're not in harmony with everything that is. And it's kind of, I don't want to say a guilty pleasure. I'm not sure how else I can talk about this, but because there's nothing to be guilty about. But like as the time has been circling towards Earth Day, it's probably one of my most important times of the year, personally and professionally. Like when I think about, Michaela and I have been doing this series on integrity, and one of the ways that I define integrity is living in alignment with my core values. And when I was 5, my dad took me camping and fishing by a river. And I remember just sitting on a rock next to this river and being like, this earth is magnificent, and I love her so much. And I want to live my life in such a way that I do as little harm as I possibly can. And I get to appreciate and enjoy the earth as much as I can. And even when I was a young child, that became a core value of mine, and it's stuck with me all the way through today. And so when I feel that April come upon us, I align so much of my personal and professional life around Earth Day, because to me, it's like a New Year's. It's a time of reflecting on how I'm doing with my own environmental commitments, like how I'm living my life as softly as I can on the earth. And also how much time I'm spending in nature. And and getting off of technology and getting out of my head and into what I think is just, is this, like you were saying, Ron, was so beautiful, that sacred mountain, or that sacred experience. And I think that's really the essence of what gets transmitted, or what we connect to when we're in nature, is that we can find back our way back into the sacred and what's most meaningful to us. And maybe that's true for me and not for everybody, but that's certainly been my experience.
Mm.
Yeah, I love the examples of, practicing with and in nature that you're sharing. I'm in the midst of teaching a 8-week Okunin class, and we began working with the first symbol and mantra this past weekend, which is associated with earth, associated with the body, the first diamond. And, we go into a lot of the, spirituality and the history and the esoteric aspects of these symbols and mantras. And then we bring it back to what are they actually directing our attention to, which, in this case is our connection with earth and the earth of our body. And so, as part of the invitation for them to engage with that as homework, things like standing barefoot in the grass as part of their assigned practices, things like, finding a stone and holding it for a period of time. Like, what are ways that we can follow our own impulses and our own intuition around engaging directly with the earth while holding this symbol, while working with this mantra, bringing those two together so that as much as possible, it becomes a direct experience and a direct connection within our psyche, within our body, our muscle memory, between these elements of the system of Reiki, these symbols and mantras, which can feel abstract or esoteric, and our direct experience with the world and our direct experience with that which these tools are designed to bring our attention to. And I love that type of fluidity, that because the system of Reiki is so specifically designed to mirror our experiences of nature, that we can very seamlessly bring them together in our day-to-day life. It's just another way in which Reiki can come alive in our daily life in very accessible and very profound ways. I think that your comments around how overwhelming it can be to think about the environmental challenges that we're facing. And these are some of the remedies to that, to get us dialed back into it on a scale that we can actually interface with, to have that direct personal connection with the living world within us and around us, and to develop a relationship with it such that we pay more attention and we have more, for some of us, it might be that it helps us care more. For others of us, it might be to help dampen that overwhelm, but that idea that, like, there are ways in which I can engage with supporting a sustainable, healthy environment that don't have to completely overwhelm and shut me down. It can happen at the scale of, one tiny little space, one tiny little action. And what I've found is that oftentimes when we engage with it in that relational, direct, bit by bit way, it does embolden us and make us feel stronger and like we have a strong enough foundation, like the mountain, to take some of these bigger actions and do things that are perhaps beyond what we thought that we could accomplish. And that's definitely been true in my life over the years. My environmental activism grew out of my gardening. It grew out of, being in the woods. It grew out of paying attention to the state of the natural world within me and around me, and letting that concern develop, but not falling into that sense of overwhelm, because I was staying focused on the scale that I could work with it. And the system of Reiki has really connected really well with that pattern, and has really brought it back into my life, because I did get overwhelmed at a certain point, and I had to kind of back off of the overt kind of activism and like political work that I was doing around the environment. It became too top heavy for me, right? Too much in my head, too much in engaging on these political levels, and I was moving away from my direct relationship and my direct purpose for caring about it in the first place. And working with Reiki really brought me back to it again at a level that I felt like I could be engaged directly with. And I'm really grateful for that, because it's something that matters a lot to me. And it was a really missing piece of my life during that time when I had felt like I had to back off. And, really discover that kind of working politically was not the thing I was supposed to be doing. Working directly with bioremediation on the land that I live on was what I needed to be focusing on. Yeah.
I think that's a real reflection of the way that I see this anyway, the practice, which is that, caring for ourselves, if we can begin here, then we care for the world around us. And it's once again that mirroring of ourselves and the universe, and seeing that universe within us and starting there is less overwhelming than starting out there to start with, right? And I actually see that as a bit of a, if I look at my place, right? So I've got 5 acres, which to someone with a big place, that's not a lot, but someone with a small place, it's a lot. And so for me to manage all of that, for years, I sort of sat here when I first came here and I thought, I don't know what to do here. And I felt very much like this is not mine, right? And so I didn't do anything. I really just sat here. And it took years before I started doing things and creating things and really feeling a part of it, because it was, I guess, overwhelming. You sort of sit in this big space and you think, do I have to do anything to start with? And but yes, we live here, so there is that. How do I want to live in this space? There's a lot of questions and thoughts, and I really enjoyed that process. And it's interesting because I sort of have done a lot of things, and that now at the moment I've got a separate building that I'm in, sort of from the building that I was in before, and I've got around it a fence, and I'm working within that space. So it's like working from the smaller. And because once again, you just going from the small and working on the small, and then letting maybe the rest be a little more untamed and wild. And I don't know, it's just so interesting how we interact with nature and how we feel it. I saw some really, I heard some really lovely research just last week about healing and nature, and they were saying that they put people who were recovering in hospital rooms without any windows, for example, and they tracked their healing process, and then they put people in hospital rooms with windows that looked out onto another concrete wall and tracked their healing process, and then they put people in a hospital room which had a window which looked out into nature, and track their healing process, and how much faster the people were healing from just even being able to see nature. So, us bringing nature into our lives, into our world, like I go that side. No, it's that side. I've got a little plant. Carrie's got plants. I'm sure you've got plants, Michaela. Even though there's all that nature outside, just having nature in with us, I mean, we wouldn't exist without, we would have no oxygen without nature, to start with. Just that very fundamental, basic idea of, trees and plants. And so just bringing it all in and having it close to us is just so, it feels nurturing, and it reminds us all the time of who we are and where we come from. And I think, it's quite beautiful.
So good. I think going back to that whole idea of environmental overwhelm and just finding that way that you can give back, or that you can kind of manage that feeling or find an outlet for either, whether it be your own connection to nature or sense of activism around environmentalism. For years, I really struggled with that. And I have a degree in environmental science, and I, went down that path in my career. And at the same time, it wasn't me either. Like, I was like, if I really am going to do this work, I'm going to be fighting bureaucracy and writing so much and working with institutions and structures that feel so much bigger than me. And it didn't feel right, and led me down this path of doing Reiki and yoga, and I'm really grateful that I'm on the path that I am on. Yeah, there's always been the sense that, like, I want to give back, and I want to still, this is a core value of mine. So over the last few years, I started to donate $1 for every Reiki session that I provide to the World Wildlife Fund. And I've gotten really passionate about that because well, wildlife conservation is a huge way that you can make an impact on the environment. Not only does it help, animals that are on the verge of extinction, but it also helps create more protected land. It also helps with indigenous rights. And so it kills a lot of birds with one stone by protecting wild animals. And so I really kind of been able to just tune in and focus my efforts there and say that this is my cause and this is how I'm going to give back. And this is how my Reiki practice ripples out and makes a bigger impact in the world. And it's been really fulfilling to create that for myself. And I open it up all to you because I'm inviting other Reiki practitioners to join me to donate $1 for every Reiki session that you provide, also to the World Wildlife Fund, or it could be your cause, whatever it is. And I think for anybody who struggles with overwhelm, whether it be in the world of environmental stuff, or maybe it's with child abuse, or with Amnesty International, or there's tons of causes out there that really pull on tug on our heartstrings. So I think it's really important to know your cause, and know that cause that moves you. That and I knew I found it when I was reading to my kids at night, and especially when they were really young, and they were learning about like polar bears and tigers and lions. And as cute as that was, I mean, the reality is these animals are on the verge of extinction, and that in my child's lifetime, like, I'm not all of them, but like orangutans, like, they could only live in zoos, and that would be the only remnants of them. And that to me broke my heart, and it invited me to move, like myself into action. And that's hard, it's hard to do that, but it's so important, it's so important to listen to that. And so I was mentioning this in the last time I was speaking, but I kind of didn't go there. But lately I've had this, like, I don't want to say guilty pleasure, but this pleasure of enjoying the Lion King soundtrack, which I know you can laugh as much as you want. But I've been listening to The Circle of Life, and this song is so profound. It's so profound. It speaks about stepping in into what I think is Reiki, is to be in this movement and flow and sacredness of nature and our own progress through our life, and how that's connected to everything that is, and that we're all on that wheel, we're all moving through life, and in that there is some guidance and there is some hope to help us find our place in the world. And I know I've struggled with that. Finding my place in the world has always been a big part of my life, and yet I found it now. And now I have this joy of, like, feeling like I can move and I can live and be in alignment with my values and with the way I want to live my life. And it gives me a sense of freedom that, like, I've never known. And this is Reiki to me. Like, this is Reiki, is just to be able to be in that energy and that sacredness. And why I think it really matters for women is that as women, it's maybe it's biological, maybe it's generational, but we have not had that freedom in so many generations. to live our life in our own way, to have more freedom. And that's why I think Reiki attracts so many women. Ultimately, is that we women, we really need this medicine. We need to be in that sacredness of life and that pulse and that energy. And it helps us recapture our self-worth and our values and our freedom.
Yeah.
There's something that is kind of coming up for me as we have this conversation. And it's around the challenges that can come up for us when we do choose to focus our attention on the things that we've been describing. And, as I said in the start, I've really over the years shifted my lifestyle, really my patterns of living, to be as closely as possible aligned with the seasons and the cycles of the world, and the way in which things are happening outside of my window, and kind of reflecting that in the way that I live my life here. That is historically how humans have lived, because humans are animals, and so humans, for much of our existence, have been well aligned with the rhythms and cycles and patterns of the world, and we're so far outside of that. So far outside of that in modern society, and have been for a couple hundred years. And I think what I'm wanting to speak to here is that there's situations where we have to kind of choose the discomfort that we're going to lean into. And in this case, there's profound pain and discomfort and dis-ease that we are experiencing as society and as individuals by our disconnection from nature. I see that as such a big part of the root of how we are out of balance in society. Just if we look at the way in which we approach food production and distribution, and the kind of modern belief that we should be able to access any food at any time, and the environmental disaster that it has been to transport food all over the world out of season. And when we think about the impact of being disconnected from nature, I mean, that example that you gave, Bronwen, of the literal physical, biological health impacts of just observing nature, let alone being inside of it. There's documented, physiological disease that we're experiencing in mass because of our disconnection from nature. There's a lot of really powerful scholarship about that. The book Last Child in the Woods comes to mind. And so we know that there's incredible discomfort, pain, suffering, disease, individually, communally, culturally, and environmentally, by choosing to opt out of the cycles of nature, or believing that we can, which we really cannot for, over time. But, we've been pretending as if we can for a very long time. On the other hand, when we do choose to plug in and pay attention and align ourselves more carefully with the cycles of nature, there are other forms of discomfort that can come up. Firstly, we find that we have to give up certain things in our life, like having access to every food we want at all times. I've been eating seasonally as much as I can for years, and that was an uncomfortable transition, to give up certain foods that I'm used to eating at different times of the year. There's discomfort in realizing that, so much of our consumption that we take for granted, just when we're paying attention to being part of nature, we just can't engage in with integrity anymore. But then there's also the ways in which we run up against the structures of our society that are out of alignment with nature. Just the timing of things, for example, the time when kids are supposed to be at school, which aligns with the workday, which aligns with, certain structures that how we want to organize our life. But that does not align with the time that the sun rises and sets, on a given day. My kid and I were talking about this morning, she's like, it's just like, I don't know why I can't, get up and get to school on time. I'm like, because you're not supposed to be up that early, to go do work, So there's a lot of discomfort in trying to operate outside of the systems that humans have set up and be more inside of the structures that our bodies are telling us that we should be inside of. And then finally, this is something that's come up really profoundly. There's a couple of specific practices that I've developed around working with trees in particular, using variations on Joshin Kokyoho. And whenever I run these practices with folks, inevitably what happens is a sharp awareness that one or more people will get about the discomfort that nature is in based on our interventions. And this painful awareness of the state of the natural world due to pollution and so on. And that's incredibly uncomfortable, right? Because we become accustomed to looking away from those things and thinking, well, I can't do anything about that. And so I'm just not going to pay attention to that. And when we step into a nature-based practice, or a practice that has us pay attention to the natural world and our, the reality that we are absolutely the natural world. We are not different from the natural world. We are animals of the world. It's painful. It can be really, really painful to look at that. And so, we choose our discomfort. We choose the pain that comes into our life. And for me, the discomfort of aligning with the natural world has become my choice. And because we have the system of Reiki, and I talk about this so often, it's like a broken record, but, so much of the benefit of practicing Reiki has been making the physical sensation of there being enough room inside of myself to hold discomfort and to be with the pain of the world and to stay focused on things that matter to me, even when it's uncomfortable. And, that's just one of many ways that Reiki and nature and our day-to-day lives are so beautifully paired together. Because Reiki literally helps us make room for all of the things that actually matter to us and give us enough of a sense of empowerment and foundation and structure and stability, and then spaciousness, openness to possibility, connectedness, compassionate connection with ourselves and others. It builds those things inside of ourselves so that we can be fully engaged in the world in the ways that matter to us and resist disconnecting and dissociating from the world, which is part of the disease that so many humans on the planet are enmeshed in right now.
Yeah, when I think of the word grounding, we talk about it all the time. People use it in all sorts of ways. But when we talk of the word grounding, the main word in that is ground. Feel the ground, know the ground, be of the ground. And we have to remember that that's who we are, that we are those things. And without that, we do the most craziest things. I mean, I saw that, I'm not going to get into a whole litany of negative things, but there was one thing that I saw that just blew my mind. And it was that in China, they were building high rises to actually put pigs in for factory farming. And, there might be, I don't know, but it was something like 90 stories high or something insane like that. Like, it was insane. And it was, it's just totally disconnected from the world, disconnected from compassion, disconnected from understanding that, we can't treat the world like that because it's all going to go wrong, right? And so, incredibly sad things that we have to, that's when we get the overwhelm, right? When we hear those things and you think, what can you do? But the only thing you can do is go back to your own self and your own grounding. And I actually thought of a nice little challenge while you guys were chatting there about because there's one other aspect of the system of Reiki that we often don't do a lot with, which is poetry. And I love the fact that, the system of Reiki started with poetry, nature poetry. So poetry about nature, because something about poetry, words in, how do you say that? Words in I mean, the difference between poetry and just, a paragraph of writing, it's something, there is beauty in it, in its, it's sort of like a little magic, I guess, isn't it? How putting different words together creates something, a feeling, or thoughts, which are often just unique to each one of us. So poetry used with the system of Reiki, when it first started, it was the Meiji Emperor's poetry that Mikao Usui used. It was very popular at the time, and I can add a poem into the blurb at the bottom. But what I of this video. But what I was thinking was, a lot of people find that by going into that space and writing poetry about nature, that we start to really feel that, because we have to think about it. We really contemplate what we're looking at, the experience of being in nature. And those short poems, like the Meiji Emperor's poems, they're called waka. But there's another type of poetry called haiku, which is really popular, which is like 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. And I thought it'd be a nice little challenge if we could all do, and maybe if anyone else is interested as well, writing some haiku, nature haiku, and adding them into our into the comments, because it just is that moment of stopping and being in nature, thinking of nature, experiencing nature. And I think that contemplation, Mikao Usui used them just to contemplate while meditating. And I think it's a lovely way of integrating nature into ourselves. So I'm going to do it at any rate.
I think you should do that, and we should share our poetry in our group, our Reiki Women podcast embodying Reiki group.
Yes, absolutely.
That sounds like an excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's do that.
you could definitely do that practice.
And once you start writing haiku, I don't know if you guys have ever done it, but once you start, it's hard to stop. It's really addictive. And you think, oh, can I even do one? And then you're like, next thing you've got like, 15 different haiku in front of you, because it's just so much fun to actually do. So, yeah.
I wrote a series of haikus after the first time I did a Reiki class and had a reiju, and I cannot find them. I've been looking through journals for a long time trying to find them because I really loved them. But maybe it's time to let those go and let some new ones come through. So I appreciate it.
The other thing about, just one more thing about the haiku is I was going to say in that the whole thing that they used to do with the poetry, I'm sure I've mentioned it before, but I do love it, is that they would go out to a full moon and actually recite the poems to a full moon. And it's almost like giving back to nature something, isn't it? It's so beautiful. So if you have a full moon, there's another opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Love it.
Well, and I've been wanting to mention too about the Shigundo practice of the 5 elements and building a pagoda in your subtle body. And I got to experience that meditation journey with Franz Steen a while back, and it was so profound. And talks about, as you connect to each element, the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space. These are foundational elements both in Reiki, of course, and it's influenced through Shigundo and Shintoism and Buddhism, but also it's the same in yoga as well.
Yeah.
And so much of Ayurveda, like the whole healing section of yoga, is all about harmonizing with the elements and harmonizing with the flow of energy. And so I think those practices are incredibly profound. And when you harmonize with those elements and you find a synergy, a balance between them, that is also a pathway into the great bright light and into the state of Reiki, state of being with Reiki. And I found that there's a sense of a desire sometimes within rest and Reiki circles, I think, that they want to isolate the thing that feels really powerful for you as a healer and then just exemplify that. But it's like anything out of balance with the other, it is disharmonious. So like if you focus on the element of fire, for example, or even grounding too, and you're not connecting to flow, you're not connecting to the other 5 elements, you can get stuck there. And so it's important to be with all of them, even like you were saying, Michaela, even if it's uncomfortable. And the elements, as I've taught them and experienced them, a lot of times they confront us with death as well. And because we know, like, if you connect enough to earth, you're like, I'm, eventually going to be laid in the earth. And you connect enough to water, you might have fear of drowning, or those kinds of uncomfortable emotions that come up, because the elements are ultimately bigger than us. Like, they're so much bigger than us. They are the essence of who we are. And I think Bronwen once you said too that the precepts are a way of preparing ourselves for death, energetically, emotionally, but they also give us a pathway to embrace life and live life more fully. And I think that's the importance of these nature-based practices. And when we feel environmental overwhelm, it's important to go into nature. Even that, and be there and be with nature. And I feel really heartened by what's been happening in the world this last year. Is that we've had record rains, like huge and massive amounts of rain in California, enough to bring almost the whole state out of drought. And I was talking to a friend who said that there was a rainstorm recently in, I think, West Virginia that was like more intense than anyone's recorded in 1,000 years, which is fierce. There's nature is a force. The ferociousness of it has to be, confronted. We have to be in that. And that's also something of this vulnerability and this openness and awareness that Reiki invites us into as well, is to be in something, inside of something that's really bigger than us, and yet still find our place and still feel safe and grounded and supported in what we need.
Just about what you were saying before, Pema Chodron, the Buddhist teacher, says that we die as we lived. And you can see that in so many different ways, but we actually die going back into nature, right? As you were just saying. So coming from nature, how connected are we in nature, and the balance that we find between these things. But was something else I was just gonna say? Oh, just about the 5 elements. I was actually thinking when we decided to do nature that would be a really lovely practice for the monthly practice group, which I'm holding this month. So if you come along to the monthly practice group this month, we will be working with the 5 elements in nature. So that will be a beautiful thing to do too. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I know that it's really exciting to take these conversations into practice. And so we're so looking forward to hosting that next round of Embodying Reiki with you, Bronwen. So join us, and that 5-element practice is absolutely fantastic. And then we'll share about our haiku exercise in our Reiki Women podcast group, Facebook group. So if you're not involved in that group, join on in, share one of your haikus. And if you weren't sure exactly what the instructions are, we'll give you some more detailed instructions on how to design your own haiku, nature-based haiku, and share it with us all. Well, friends, we just appreciate you all so much, and would be hopeful that this conversation sparked some interest for you, or something that you'd like to share or comment. So feel free to leave a little comment for us on the podcast, or share it to somebody you think would benefit. And we love you all so much. So we'll see you again next time.